The United States of America and Israel have always taken the position that they can literally have their cake and that they can eat it. In the short to medium term, they may think that that is true. But in the long term, it is what creates resistance. It is what creates organizations and energizes organizations such as ISIS. So that you may think that you are safe as a nation, but your people are not safe. In order to understand Iran in its contemporary characteristic, it is important to also give a historical context. Of course, we now know that there is dissatisfaction with the Ayatollahs and their theocracy. But it is important to remember that the history of Iran as we know it today must be traced to as early as 1925 with the Pahlavi regime. And if one does not drown in history, after the establishment of the Pahlavi regime, we then had the famous or infamous coup in 1953, which removed the Pahlavis before they restored themselves. And after that, the agitation by the Ayatollahs led by Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. And that is how in 1979, the Americans now come into the fore a lot more visibly during the administration of Jimmy Carter. And you remember it is during that period that there was a siege of the American embassy for 444 days. And 52 American diplomats were held blindfolded and, of course, humiliated. And I think the United States of America has never forgotten that humiliation. And in as much as the Ayatollahs then came into office with the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini becoming the spiritual leader, and we had different presidents, Rafsanjani, Rouhani, and then later Ahmadinejad. And what one saw was the demand by the Ayatollahs that there is only one way of running Iran, through a theocracy. And then the accusation that they were trying to be a nuclear power, and their closeness initially to the Soviet Union and to Russia. So there has been a combination of issues, and that, of course, very quickly led to a number of issues leading up to the Iraq-Iran war between 1980 and 1988. And after that, the economies started suffering, despite the reforms that were instituted, particularly during the populist administration of Ahmadinejad, attempts to use oil to improve the quality of people's lives. And after that, of course, during the Rouhani administration, when the nuclear deal was entered into between the Europeans and the Americas, and things never quite normalized, and the repression of the people. You have a society which is aware of what is happening in the world, the freedom that are enjoyed by everybody or most people in different parts of the world, and a theocracy which wants to dictate what you wear, the place of women in society. And that is how in the year 2022, when the young lady Mahsa Amini dies in prison, that was when we saw people coming out into the streets of Tehran and other places. And there is a sense in which this is a continuation of what started in the year 2022. The people had conquered fear, but right now the situation is exacerbated because of the sanctions. The Iranians cannot sell their oil freely. The Iranians cannot access the markets freely. They cannot borrow. and their currency has been devalued in a manner that has never been seen in many parts of the world. And that has made the people begin to rise up. And they are rising up on a number of issues. They are saying we want greater freedom. They are saying the economy is so bad that we want to see improvement. But the reality is that the economy cannot improve. And one can see that in the very reconciliatory messages from both the spiritual leader or the Ali Khamenei and President Massoud. The demonstrations have been going on for almost 3 weeks, but they are not coming out with violent language, if you may. And one of the things that they are now doing is to externalize the problem. They are saying, we know we have domestic problems, but we can see the hand of the United States of America. We can see the hand of Israel. And as regards Israel, you remember in the month of June, the year 2025, there was the 12-day war. And that war, in my view, has never been concluded. There was a very loose agreement which was midwifed by the United States of America, and there is an armistice of sorts. But technically, Iran and Israel are at war. Which then begs the question, what is happening now? What is happening now from where I sit is that you have an administration which is a theocracy, an administration that is going through a constitutional crisis. There is a younger population of Iranians who think that their country should be administered differently. There are economic problems. The remnants of the Pahlavi regime, and we are being told that one of the sons of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi is actually one of the prime movers of the demonstrations that are taking place in Iran now. Whether true or not, we do not know. We are being told that the Israelis are also somehow exercising some control via an invisible hand. We are told that the Americans are also present. And in the case of the Americans, they cannot escape indictment because their President Trump is saying, you touch any of the demonstrators and we are locked and ready to bomb you. So that is the situation in which Iran finds herself. And as we speak now, they are on high military alert because they are thinking that in the same way that it happened in Venezuela, the Americans may very well parachute in, seize Massoud, the president, seize Khamenei, the supreme leader, and seize other people. And we must remember during the 12-day war, the Israelis were able to eliminate senior scientists, so that there is a possibility that this can happen. I know many commentators take the view that what happened in Caracas cannot happen in Tehran. But even if it is not an exact replica of what happened in Caracas, the Americans are capable of entering into that space and creating a vacuum, therefore. And if a vacuum is created, then what will ensue is chaos, and we don't have to look far. When Saddam Hussein was eliminated in Iraq, you've never seen Iraq go back to factory setting, if one may use that metaphor. So Iran finds herself in a very difficult situation because of a combination of legitimate domestic problems, a constitutional crisis, and external problems, which all conjoined only spell one word: danger. You know, whenever you see a country going through a crisis of the kind that we see in Iran, it means that institutions are no longer responding to the needs of the people. The reasons may be many, but let us trace history a little. During the days of the Pahlavi regime, in the 1979 revolution that was led by Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, The argument was that the Pahlavi administration had become oppressive, they had become corrupt, they were no longer serving the interest of the people, and that therefore what Iran needed was a new constitutional dispensation that gave pride of place to Islam as articulated by the Ayatollahs, which is the Shia version of Islam. They also promised that they would undertake economic reforms, and some of these reforms were in fact evident in the early days of President Rafsanjani and Rouhani, that they were also going to ensure that whenever it was necessary, they would enter into arrangements that would ensure peace. So they made sense during that period that there was need to remove the Pahlavis. And even during the 444-day siege, one of the demands for Americans was, return to us these corrupt individuals that we may punish them. Then came the 1980 Iran-Iraq war, which devastated the economy. And after that war, and in 1989, following the death of Khomeini and the rise of Khamenei, the whole idea of the economy being improved, oil subsidies, fuel subsidies, to ease the burden of the people, legitimized the regime. But then the economy started going down, and the people started asking, but the economy is not improving. The quality of our lives are not improving. Our currency is becoming useless. Our investments are becoming useless. The Ayatollahs are oppressing us even more. Come the year 2022, the young girl is arrested for not dressing according to the code prescribed by the regime. She unfortunately dies in prison. And the women are now saying, we want to be treated like human beings. So as it is now, there is appetite for change. For some people, there's even nostalgia for the old regime, which is very human. And all these factors then legitimize and justify the kind of calls that we see from the United States of America that this is a tired administration. And of course, the word that the United States of America and Western Europe always use is democracy, a one-size-fits-all Eurocentric, Americocentric model of governance. And the younger generation are responding to this rhetoric. And I hear some of them saying, what we want is change. We'll deal with what change brings later. A dangerous thing to say, because history is consistent in telling us that when you make change and that change is not orderly, restoring order can take time. But that is an intellectual debate which does not respond with real politique. Real politique is that the Americans would want to see a totally different administration in Tehran. The Israelis would want to see a totally different administration in Tehran, and for specific reason. During the 12-day war, for the first time in an impactful way, a missile landed in Tel Aviv from Tehran. Missiles supposedly supplied from Tehran, emanated from Yemen. So in the context of geopolitics, Israel sees Iran as the only viable threat, which is so close to nuclear capability, and that if you neutralize this regime, then you kill that possibility. And remember that the Americans also bombed some of the facilities, and they think that this is an unfinished business. So when they talk about regime change, they also want to finish the unfinished business. And from where I sit, that unfinished business started in 1979 with the humiliation of the United States of America, and it must be concluded. Iran, the Ayatollahs must be humiliated. American administration, the presidents notwithstanding, has a long memory. And they remember 1979.